Hi everyone, this is Stylianos. On this short video, I'd like to say a few words about the BankX tokenomics audit. So, auditing tokenomics is a fairly new development in the area of tokenomics. It's actually been only a few years since tokenomics was, let's say, established as a field. When I started talking about this in 2017, 2018, a few people taking this seriously. It looks like now we're actually moving to the next stage of not only designing token economies, but also of auditing token economies. So this is the BankX tokenomic audit, which you can see here. It was conducted over a period of a few months, starting around September, I think, of 2021, finishing around December. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to share some thoughts about how you can conduct an audit. Keep in mind that auditing tokenomics is something fairly new, so there's no, let's say, established method or framework to do this, okay? So essentially, what I did in this audit is I borrowed tools from, let's say, data science, or like from tokenomics, from economics, etc. And then I applied them in this context, okay? The important thing to keep in mind is that no matter the tools you use, essentially the purpose of an audit in this case is to convince a skeptical reader and an informed reader that the statements that a project is making around their token economy are true and are correct. And I think that as this area evolves, we're going to see more streamlined frameworks and some of the methods will be standardized. But my hope is that this audit can actually set some standards for this field as a whole. So that being said, let's go through the structure of the audit. We start with an introduction, and what we're stating in the introduction is what token, basically summarizing the core of the token economy, and then we also discuss the inspiration behind the project. Then we move on to some terminology, and then we're moving on to the goals of the analysis and the tools of the analysis. So the goals of the analysis is very important because what we're essentially writing here is we're writing in, let's say, order of importance, the goals of the project, more specifically the token economy. So this is a stable coin. So by far the most important goal is that the peg doesn't break. Okay, and then we move on to other goals which are important but not as important as the first one, because if you have a stable coin and the breaks, then that's no good. But then you have some other goals like the fact that BankX token is a store of wealth. Then we move on to the tools of the analysis, and again the methods that we're using for this audit, they're borrowed from data science and they vary, right? So using from empirical proof and comparison with other projects to game theory to statistics. And here are the assumptions. Every type of analysis in economics or tokenomics, it's always based on some assumptions. So we need to state them. So essentially what we're doing in the introduction is we're setting the foundation for what is to follow. And then we start with the analysis, okay? So one of the mechanisms that we've used in this audit is creating this table which outlines the forces, inflationary and deflationary, on the BankX token price. So this is a very structured way to see which forces are applied on the token, but also to understand what levers the project has in order to influence those mechanisms. That's not different from, studying a real economy and saying, look, these are the inflationary pressures, these are deflationary pressures, and the lever is, for example, the central bank interest rate. Okay, obviously in a real economy, the system is more unconstrained in a sense, so it's more difficult to do this kind of thing. But in the token economy, this is actually much easier. And then we outline its mechanism and we analyze it. So essentially what we're trying to demonstrate in this section is that there's a balance between inflationary and deflationary forces. And even if the numbers, even if you can't prove the numbers are correct, by numbers I mean things like rewards and interest rates, etc., because these are always based on assumptions, right? The thing is that if the project has the access to the right levers, as they're outlined here, then there's trust that these levers can be pulled in certain directions in order to stabilize the price. Okay, so that's like saying, look maybe, again, similar to what happens in a real economy, right? So you see deflationary pressure, inflationary pressure, the central bank, the government tries to do something about it. And essentially, if they have access to the right levers, and if these levers can be pulled hard enough, then you think, okay, it's more likely that you're going to reach the optimal outcome, which can be some kind of equilibrium or otherwise. And this is what we're doing really in this section, this kind of analysis. And then we move on to some more advanced concepts like integrated protocol owned liquidity. And then we move on to the peg stability analysis. For the peg stability, we use data from other stablecoins in order to understand what's the current state of the art and essentially to understand what kind of variation we could see. And we compare different stablecoins. So here we're using some kind of proof by analogy and data. What I mean by this is that we have all these different stablecoins, and we also have Frax, we have Terra, and actually they perform quite well when you compare them to more traditional, let's say, stablecoins in terms of the variance. Even though pretty much of the variance of the peg, even though pretty much all the stablecoins actually perform quite well. And Terra only has like a very high maximum deviation because they had a crash, which is analyzed in the marginal cases analysis. So essentially, in this case, the argument is that look, BankX, has similarities with Frax. Frax has actually worked better than many other projects. So this, is some kind of proof or evidence that, this similarity between the two projects, that what BankX is suggesting is actually pretty feasible because some of those things have done before. And then we move on to a game theoretic analysis of the bonding curves and how they work. I won't expand on this too much here, but yes, game theory is obviously one more tool that's used in economics, and it's quite popular. So you see, we use different types of analysis for different parts of the project, right? And every time is the same argument. We want to demonstrate to an informed reader that, yes, this actually holds, right? That this proposed mechanism can work as suggested. And then finally, we move on to what we call marginal cases analysis, where we examine, this is like a stress test, like a thought experiment, like what's going to happen if X happens, right? And then we demonstrate how by taking certain actions, the project could stop making incentives. And that's pretty much the audit, okay? So you see there's a combination of mechanisms and methods being used. Make sure that we're clearly stating the objectives, the goals, the assumptions. And again, the goal is that an informed reader can always try to refute what we're writing, but everything is structured in a way that they can go back to the assumptions or the goals or the tools, and they can see what leads to where, right? So A leads to B, it leads to C. So for example, if someone has an argument, say, look, I believe, Terra Luna, it's not going to survive in the long run for whatever reason. Yes, they can go back to the assumptions and see whether, according to our model of the world, this is true or not, okay? And in the end of the day, the goal of a tokenomics audit is like to do two things. One is obviously to convince an informed reader that the goals of the projects can actually be achieved. And the other one is obviously to help fix any, let's say, weaknesses in the tokenomics design, pretty much like a smart contracts audit, right? So if there's something wrong with smart contracts, you just go back and you fix the code. So that was it. I hope this was informative. I've also written about this on my blog. You can obviously find this tokenomics audit on the BankX website. And as always, make sure to reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.